define for our purposes what stress and anxiety are. So we took a jumble of them and we sort of sided with one of them. So for our purposes then, anxiety, as it says up here, is a feeling of nervousness, apprehension, worry, and fear. So it's a very general term. It's apprehension, fear, worry, etc. And for those of you who like the dictionary, because that has good definitions, it says fear or nervousness about what might happen. Okay? So then, as a difference between that and stress, though they may overlap, stress is a state or a feeling of tension from adverse circumstances. So just examples are something that might be demanding, work, etc., or new circumstances, something we aren't used to facing. So those are just the very basics.
So what do these look like in our lives? So common stresses, when we think of, everyone's like, oh, I'm so stressed out. It's like, okay, well, what's stressing you out? A lot of the time, I think you'll find it's something on this list. Paying the bills can be really stressful. If you're dealing with an illness in your family, that takes a real toll on us. Children, as all of you know, and we're about to find out, are very stressful. If you work long hours or inconsistent hours, or especially if you and your spouse work different hours, that can be a real stress on your family. Having more on your to-do list than you have time for. I don't know about you guys, but as soon as I get one thing done, I erase it and then I probably add another. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, my to-do list is never ending. Like, it's literally just constantly generating itself. And then just not having enough time to rest, do the things that, give you life, recharge you. So those are some of the common stresses that we deal with. Anxieties, on the other hand, so these are more of those feelings of worry and fear. So those can come from several different things. It could be a current circumstance you're in. So like if you don't know if you can pay bills on time, that's something you would be worrying about, or that illness in your family causes you to worry, how is this going to turn out? Before a large unsettling event, such as an interview, your first day of work, having a baby, a lot of it's just the unknown. And that leads to future events. How many times are we so caught up in what's going to happen tomorrow? What's going to happen with this future event? Are my children going to be successful? How are things going at work? Am I going to reach the goals that I want to there? Retirement, that's something that I've been hit in the face with recently, which might seem weird, but everyone's like, you need to start saving for retirement now. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I haven't even thought of that. So just worrying about the future. And then personal pressure. I think we put a lot on ourselves of, am I doing good enough in my roles? Am I doing a good enough job at work? Am I being the kind of parent that I want to be? Is my house always clean? Are my expectations up to, what we think everyone else has for us? So those are some of the things that our anxieties can stem from.
And obviously that's not an exhaustive list. It's not a list of everything that you could feel, but it's just an example of trying to show you the difference between a stress and anxiety, because really, they really bundle together in my mind a lot of the time too. Even when I'm working with the kids that I work with. So I'm a caseworker, and I used to be direct care worker, so the kids that I work with, they really don't get what that means. So it begs a question for us to really know, so that our children, when they're coming to learn what the pressures of life, culture, etc. are, we can teach them how to make it through, right? All right, so types of stress and anxiety. So just further distinguishing, the better we know, the better we can tackle. All right. So one type is acute, so that's more the short term, and then chronic. That's sort of self-explanatory. But to give you examples of acute and chronic stresses, a family member may only be sick for a week. Maybe if your child got a cold or something, or they could be sick for years. Unfortunately. You could cut it close on paying bills for one paycheck, or expectedly struggle for multiple. upcoming. Anxieties, so acute versus chronic. An interview is a temporary anxiety if you have one coming up, but you may struggle worrying and fearing about how well you are parenting after most decisions that you make, perhaps.
All right, so we've kind of thrown a lot at you in the beginning here with stress and anxiety and how they differ but relate to each other. So they overlap a lot. And as we said in articles, we found people using the words interchangeably. So really, there's a lot in common there. But they do have differences. So a good example is like you can feel pressure about the bills piling up. So that pressure is a stressor. It's something that's causing you stress, and then your reaction to it is worrying about how it's going to affect your family, and that's where the anxiety comes in. So they're not the same thing, but a lot of different things, lead to stress and anxiety, I'm sure. As we've been talking, you guys have been able to think of some that you deal with in your everyday lives. But don't let that overwhelm you. Don't worry, the light is coming. We just wanted to address what you guys might be dealing with. Okay. So, are stress and anxiety always bad? No. All right. So they can be very useful to us. I know we think of them as like, oh my gosh, I'm so stressed. This is awful. I wish this would just go away. But they can be useful if we learn how to manage them in the right way. So how can they do this? They can actually help us to trust in God more. So when you're feeling overwhelmed, that can kind of be an indicator to us that, maybe we're not supposed to handle this all on our own. Maybe we're not capable of dealing with all of these pressures completely on our own, and that can point us towards our relationship with God. They can also help us evaluate what we have control over. So I think that a lot of stress and anxiety come from having this need to control everything in our lives. At least that's how I experience it a lot. It's like, okay, I need to be able to do everything perfectly, and I need to be able to control all of these different things. So there's a really great prayer that I'm sure a lot of you have heard of called the Serenity Prayer. It's, Lord, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And that's basically speaking to control. What do we have influence over? What is something that we can work towards and manage in our lives? And what are things that we simply just have no control over? Like the weather, that could be a huge stressor, depending on if you're traveling or what your activities are for the day, but we don't have control over that. So learning to let go of that can be really useful. There's something that Andrew read in a book recently that has resonated with me for so long about narrowing your circle of concern. Narrowing your circle of concern so that it's the same size as your circle of influence. So you're only worrying about the things that you can influence, essentially, and that saves you a lot of stress. I know that's easier said than done. But stress and anxiety can also just help us to be empathetic towards each other, because let's face it, we all deal with it. So it's something you can use to relate to other people and be there for them. Because it's like, okay, yeah, you've had a hard time with your kid, in school. I have too. That's really stressful, and that helps you bond, and it can be a stress release for you to get to talk to someone else about it. But they can also be useful tools just to help us succeed. I don't know about you guys, but in college I had a lot of friends that would wait until the last minute to do a paper because they were like, oh, when I feel that pressure, I perform better. And so it can be useful. I always thought that was a little crazy to put yourself through that, but they can be useful tools if we use them the right way.
All right, so this is my love, psychology. I love it. So your brain, mentally speaking, it affects a lot of what our body does physiologically. So when you feel stressed and anxious, there's a series of things that happens. So stimuli, the things out there that affect you, that cause it, that feeling that you get of stress and anxiety, something penting up, it causes in your brain, your hypothalamus, it causes it to send signals to something you may have heard of, your adrenal glands, and it releases stress hormone. So then that stress hormone, circulates through the body, and you feel all sorts of physiological, very physical things that happen. So when you say you feel a certain way, it's more than just emotional, it's physical too. If you have something coming up. So just to give you some examples, so your heart beats faster, and that's because it pushes blood to your muscles and heart and other vital organs. Your pulse rate and blood pressure go up, and the person undergoing these changes also starts to breathe more rapidly to provide that oxygen. So then that extra oxygen is sent to the brain, so you're more alert, so that your sight and hearing and other senses are sort of more escalated and can help you better prepare for whatever the stressor is, the situation. And then your body triggers release of blood sugar and fats from temporary storage sites in your body. So basically it just means your body is literally preparing you to face whatever the situation is. And sometimes the situation can be small, it can be really small, and we know it, but we can't help it. It can be really small, but like, my heart feels like it's getting ready to like fight an animal or something, So it's also called the fight or flight response when we feel that way. This is from Harvard Medical School, so the quote up there. So the fight or flight response, it's really for survival. So yeah, I see that as being a gift from God. Stress and anxiety are good on a healthy level. If you maintain a healthy level of stress and anxiety, keep it from getting unmanageable, then hey, let's see that as being awesome, because God's got your back. He made you for this. He made you to face those difficult situations so that you don't even have to consciously think of those things. You don't have to think, oh, I need my pulse to increase, my heart rate to increase. It just happens. Like God made you that way through, and we believe, if you believe, evolutionarily, like you ended up that way somehow. God guided that process then. All right? So then we're going to give you guys a chance to discuss. There are, quite a few of you guys. I wish, I could have a personal interaction with each of you to see your reaction, but I think it's important for you guys, as parents, as families, to interact with each other. So just take a breather. I hope we don't have you stressed about stress and anxiety. So just take a breather, stand up, stretch, do something, and just talk about with somebody near you what might have struck you, something you didn't know before, and maybe what you're looking forward to learning in the second half. All right? So just take. Wait, where's Sean? Is Sean in here? All right. Take a few. I don't know how many minutes you have. Yeah, we'll say about 10, 5 to 10. So we're gonna get going on the second half. All right. So I know a certain number of you guys probably want to go to mass at 10, so we're gonna get going, right? Okay. So, to start, we don't have a PowerPoint presentation for the second half, so sorry, no funny memes or anything like that. So being congruent with the first half that we said, the first half was more to know, this is more to do. What are we going to do about it? So I think it involves a little bit more of, just a little bit more of recognizing what it is when we see it, but also really this is to give you guys some tools to know how to deal with it, okay?
Yeah, so we're going to talk about when stress and anxiety reach an unmanageable level. So I think you'll find, a lot of us function day to day with these stresses, and we're meant to, but sometimes they do become too much to handle it. It reaches that level of becoming unmanageable, and it causes problems. So when it reaches that level, it affects everything. It affects your body, your mind, your mood, your behavior. So some of the ways it affects your body, like we mentioned, these biological processes happen. So they could manifest in a ton of different ways. You could have headaches, muscle tension, chest pain, fatigue, stomach problems, sleep problems. I know for me personally, sleep problems is where that kind of manifests itself. If I'm really stressed out about something, I'll be up tossing and turning all night. I'll be dreaming about it all night. It's just very unsettling.
Yeah, so then for me, I know I've had a lot of stresses and anxieties, especially when I was in school. The culture just sort of is about that. And I had, feelings of it being unmanageable when it reached the point where an ambulance had to be called. And I like half collapsed, and the ambulance came, and they made sure I was okay, and they were like, what's your life like? And I explained my schedule, and they were like, you gotta tone it down, kind of thing. I was like, okay, like taking on too much. My circle of concern is way bigger than my sphere, things I can influence. It was very unhealthy for me. So those are just on a personal level. And then as far as, okay.
It's gonna cut me off. So then your mood, too, it can affect your mood. I know I'm a very emotional person, so I can be moody, but when I'm really stressed, it gets even worse. It can make you restless, it can cause a lack of motivation where you just are so overwhelmed it like paralyzes you and you don't want to do anything. Feeling overwhelmed, being really irritable or angry, or it can lead to sadness, feelings of depression. I know I experienced like each one of these things after I graduated from college because I was kind of going through a time where I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. I was like, this is the first time I haven't been in school since I was like 3. And so it was a big life change, and that's where a lot of our anxieties and stress come from. So that was, I experienced all of the restlessness, lack of motivation. It can affect your behavior, so we can start to act differently when we're really stressed. That could mean like overeating, undereating, angry outbursts, using drugs or alcohol, tobacco, social withdrawal, even being more lethargic. So just some things to be aware of when it becomes unmanageable. This is how it might represent itself in your life.
Okay, so then long term, what can these mean? So on the short term, we know these are not positive experiences per se when we're feeling that way, like when I had the ambulance happen, that's, I think, an example of a long term. It wasn't like, just like that, as soon as the stressor or anxiety is there, I'm feeling an unmanageable like intensity of it. It was more so the long term, drudge of it. Like it was really weighing on me over time. So long-term effects of the fight or flight. Imagine the things that physiologically that we described that happen to you. Imagine that being like most of the time. Your body's not made for that. God didn't make you for that, to do it just constantly. So some examples of things that could happen if it happens long-term, unmanageably. Your immune system could be suppressed. Like disorders or illnesses could worsen over time. You could fight them less effectively. You could track digestive disorders, muscle tension, like long-standing muscle tension, short-term memory loss. This is more so a laundry list, but just giving you an idea, like not really good things. Heart attack, cardiac arrest, increased for risk, anxiety disorders. So this is more what I see, anxiety disorders, in the kids that I work with. Not all of you guys will see that, but some of you guys could. Anxiety disorders are a thing that people deal with and seek treatment for. Depression, substance use, as Emily mentioned. So then what? Like, when do you see a doctor kind of thing, or when do you get help? So here's some more like takeaway criteria for that.
Okay, so just because we want this to be educational for you guys and practical, so if it does become too much and you're experiencing some of these things, when you want to see a doctor, is basically if it's really interfering with your daily functioning. If you're not able to go to work, you're not able to maintain relationships, and just regular parts of your daily life, it's really that debilitating. That's when you should seek help. if you're feeling depressed, you're turning to unhealthy coping mechanisms like drugs or alcohol. If it's linked to a physical health problem, so if you're literally experiencing some sort of physical problem due to this stress, or lastly, suicidal thoughts or behavior. In that case, seek immediate treatment. So just things for you to be aware of. But we're not trying to overwhelm you or depress you. I know it's a lot all at once. We're just like, oh, your body might fall apart, and then you're gonna be really depressed, and all these awful things are gonna happen. Like we said, it can be good, and now we're gonna relate it more to our spirituality. So this is gonna take a positive turn.
So, okay, Genesis. We're going to the Bible now. Okay, Genesis, the fall of man, Adam and Eve, more specifically Eve took the fruit. Adam was, standing by her side. They ate the forbidden fruit. God said, specifically don't do that. Just bring that to your mind. How does anxiety and stress relate to that? So anxiety and worry, it's a sign of a struggle to trust God. When Adam and Eve sinned and ate the forbidden fruit, it was an act of choosing themselves over God. It was an act of mistrust of God's plan itself. And they didn't trust that God had a better plan for them not to eat the fruit. They sort of took it into their own hands. But this doesn't mean that you are all bad because you're feeling anxiety. It's a result of the fall of man. So the effects of sin, original sin, when Adam and Eve sinned, and sin entered the world, that's a state. That's a state that we're in, not just an act. It's something that's transmitted, that they transmitted to us. So included in the state of fallen man, we are now inclined towards evil. And evil, specifically the serpent in Genesis, tricks us and tells us that we don't need God. If we look in Genesis 3:5, the serpent literally says, "You will be like God if you eat this fruit." He's literally tempting us to not trust God and God's plan, and to take things into our own hands. But by taking things into our own hands, trying to control the outcomes, that's when we feel that way. We can't control everything. We are not meant to take on the world because Jesus already did that. Excessive stress and anxiety show us that we are not meant to carry the whole world on our shoulders and to give it to Him in a very literal sense. And we first see anxiety and worry when Adam and Eve hid from God in the garden. They sinned, and then they hid. So they did not do so out of shame, I would imagine, but naturally it would seem that they worried due to the outcome of their act. Something was happening, things were shifting. They knew God told them not to do it, or else, kind of thing. Just try to put that in your lives. Think about that as being like, if you're feeling stressed or anxious, like it's not like your fault, but like do your part in controlling the things that you can to get yourself, out of it, or to like counteract the effects of the evil that originally happened. Think of it that way.
Okay, so how can we handle stress and anxiety? What are some practical ways that we can deal with this so that we don't reach those unmanageable levels? One is exercise. I know that's one that I really turned to in my year of graduation after college. When I was really stressed, I just go work out because it releases endorphins, and endorphins make us happy. It's again just one of those biological processes that God gave us that is very helpful. Releases chemicals in the brain and makes us feel better. So if that's something that interests you, exercise is a great option. Otherwise, just simple things like getting enough sleep at night. You might be like, well, that's nice in theory, but I've got all these things to do. But sleep really should be one of our number one priorities. There's so many things that go wrong with us if we don't get enough sleep. It's our time to let our brains rest and recover and repair themselves. And if we're not letting them do that, we're just like wearing ourselves down, and we're not going to be useful to anyone in our lives. And so it's a really bad idea to skip on sleep. Other natural kind of remedies, acupuncture has been shown to block stress-induced hormones. Lavender is very soothing. soothing scent. So if you're more of the light a candle, read a book, that can just be really nice for reducing stress, finding something that relaxes you, taking a walk. That's something I really enjoy, being out in nature. So I just encourage you to think of what ones of these, you guys can incorporate into your lives, or whatever you do to relax. Try to, do that more often.
On a more psychological level, just being informed can go a long way. Mindfulness, having mind over your emotions, kind of thing. Having your will, your executive functioning in your brain. If you want to get technical, control your emotional responses. So being mindful of it, just knowing these things can help you if you aren't aware of them. Positive self-talk. So when you're feeling anxious and stressed, there are some automatic negative thoughts that probably pop into your head. Again, we're fallen man. This is what happens. It just automatically comes. So then to counteract that, practically just replace them with positive things. It's going to take time. It's not like an automatic thing, like where if you try it and try to insert positive thoughts and it doesn't work, like, oh, I shouldn't do that. No, do it. It's going to take a lot of habit building, and your brain is going to have to build up the habit too, to take over for you. So then you can say just things like, instead of like, I need to have this done, or I can't handle this, like you could say like, I know I will get it done, and I very much want to get this done, but all I can do is my best. Like, again, thinking about the things you have control over. Laughter, scientifically speaking, it's similar to exercise, engaged muscles, and it uses the stress hormone. The stress hormone that's building up, that state that you're in stressfully, you can release it by laughing or exercising, so laughing is very similar to that. Or journaling. It offers a mental outlet for that, for your feelings, your emotions that go unexpressed.
And then spiritually, so as people of faith, we have this awesome, awesome God at our disposal, and He wants us to turn to it when we're feeling stressed and anxious. And so some of the ways we can do that are through the sacraments. They were literally meant to give us the grace to kind of deal with our fallen humanity, which causes our stress. So the remedy is, going to God, receiving the sacraments, letting Him nourish you instead of trying to do it all on your own and control everything. Prayer can be really, really great at reducing stress. Sometimes you just have to let it all out before God. One of my friends, she's always like, when you're feeling overwhelmed, just like let God have it. Like, if you need to yell at Him, yell at Him. If you need to cry, cry. If you need to laugh, like anything you need to do, just He wants to take that from you. He wants to be there for you and be that, that release. So just taking advantage of our wonderful faith to help reduce stress. And it's actually scientifically proven, which is really cool, that meditation and prayer, goes into that, is one of the key components to fighting stress. So it's not just, the Catholic Church saying like, oh, you should pray to God. It's scientifically proven that having a faith will help reduce your stress and anxiety. So that's really cool.
Yeah, so then why have a faith specifically? It gives us hope. It gives us hope. It gives us these things. It gives us a frame, a scope, a lens to see things through. Like, we're placing probably what stress and anxiety are a lot better in the world than before, just, naturally. Not because we're such eloquent speakers, but just like the fact of it is, like, it all does fit together. So our faith gives us that. It gives life meaning. Your things in life, your actions, your desires, they all have purpose. So that's what our faith gives us. And faith gives us community. So this is awesome. This is very cool. This is the community. This is the hospital in a way that we can all mend each other with the help of God right over there. Which, speaking of which, we're running a little short on time, so just bear with us. But I just want to stress finally then that this isn't as well an exhaustive list of things that you can do to remedy. Anything you like to do, something that offers you a stress relief, I challenge you today just to write it down. Because when you're stressed and you're anxious, or even if you're mad, if you have some other overwhelming emotion, you're not going to be thinking clearly. We have a saying like, when you're over emotionally aroused, you're stupider. like you sort of are. You know, so like write them down now while you're not completely overwhelmed and while you're thinking about it. And then I challenge you also write something down that you haven't tried, to give it a try. Journaling, something, exercising, maybe just 10 minutes a day, something to get your blood pumping. But at the end of it, you know, our faith is a very, very key component. So, and I thank you guys for letting us talk to you this morning, and we'll see you in the Eucharist, all right?